The name on her official badge was Elara Vance, and she was the head of logistics and security at Arcturus Station, a remote scientific research outpost clinging to the frozen edge of the world. To the 30-odd scientists and engineers under her care, she was simply Ellie, a quiet, efficient administrator who meticulously tracked supply manifests, scheduled helicopter runs, and fussed over the integrity of the perimeter's sensor grid. She was known for her neat bun, her sensible winter parka, and the faint, tired lines around her Isa woman, who seemed more at home with spreadsheets than with the brutal reality of their sub-zero environment. They had seen her politely but firmly reprimand a technician for forgetting to log a fuel transfer, and they had seen her calmly deal with a power failure during a blizzard. They saw a competent professional, but they saw no warrior. They thought of her as the linchpin of their peaceful existence, not the last line of defense against the kind of storm that no weather forecast could predict. When the first mortar round struck the northern hangar, sending a shudder through the station, the unspoken thought in every single person's mind was, "We're finished." The attack was a symphony of chaos. The air, already crisp with frost, filled with the roar of explosions and the whine of ricocheting bullets. The perimeter fences, a joke against a determined assault, were torn apart. The comms tower, their only link to the outside world, went down in a flash of sparks and a plume of black smoke. 90 armed men, a private militia hired by a corporate rival to seize the station's classified research, poured out of stealth-configured transports. Their mission was simple: eliminate all personnel, secure the data, and leave no trace. Elara's voice, which moments before had been guiding a panicked scientist to a shelter, became a low, steady command over the station's internal radio. "This is Ellie. All personnel, retreat to the designated emergency shelters immediately. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. I'm initiating lockdown." In the control room, the lead scientist, Dr. Eris Thorne, watched the red dots on the schematic of the station. 90 dots, advancing with chilling precision. He looked at Elara's face on a small screen, feed calm, almost serene, as she sealed off the main corridors. "Ellie, what are you doing?" he shouted into the comms. "You need to get to a shelter. We're being overrun." "Negative, Doctor. They want the data in the central server. The shelters are secure, but they won't hold for long. I'm going to buy you time." Thorne saw the feed cut out as Elara left the control room. He and the others in the shelter knew what buy time meant. It meant she was going to face 90 armed men alone. The thought was absurd. Elara Vance, the admin, against an army of mercenaries. The word Crumble was a phantom echo in the back of his mind. But they didn't know Elara. They didn't know about the 5 tours she'd served under a different name, the covert operations, the commendations for single-handedly neutralizing hostile strongholds. They didn't know that the logistics she managed were a cover, a way to keep a low profile and put her skills to use for a more peaceful purpose. They didn't know that the Arctic station, with its maze of corridors, sub-zero temperatures, and volatile equipment, was a battlefield she understood intimately. Her first act was to turn the environment into a weapon. She didn't have a rifle or body armor. She had her wits, her training, and the station itself. The northern corridor was her first kill zone. As the first team of 6 mercenaries breached the main entry point, she wasn't waiting with a gun. She was waiting with a thermal coolant valve, a quick twist, and a pressurized jet of cryogenic coolant, a substance colder than liquid nitrogen, blasted out. turning the floor into a sheet of lethal black ice in an instant. The 6 men, laden with heavy gear, slipped and fell, to broke their legs. 4 were immobilized, their gear and weapons rendered useless by the sudden cold. Ilara moved through the chaos, quick and silent, a ghost in her winter gear. She confiscated their radios and weapons, leaving them to shiver in the ice. First 5 minutes, 6 down. The mercenaries' leader, a grizzled veteran named Kale, watched his men's thermal signatures go from active to passive on his screen. "What the hell was that?" he growled. "They're frozen solid." He changed tactics. He split his forces, sending 2 teams to different entry points. One team, a squad of 10, went for the lower maintenance tunnels. The other, 15 men, headed for the main lab entrance. Ilara was already in the maintenance tunnels. She knew every inch of them, every service access panel, every electrical junction box. As the 10 men advanced, she disabled the auxiliary heating in that section. The temperature plummeted. Then, using her access to the station's systems, she triggered the emergency steam vents, not to create heat, but to create a blinding, scalding fog that filled the narrow passage. The mercenaries, their thermal vision useless in the steam, were now blind and disoriented. She was a shadow, moving through the haze. She didn't fight them with brute force. She used her hands, her feet, and the element of surprise. A swift jab to a pressure point, a well-placed kick to a knee, a quick, efficient chokehold. One by one, the 10 men fell silent, their weapons piled neatly in a corner. 45 minutes, 16 down. The main lab entrance team was more cautious. They were a veteran squad. They advanced slowly, checking every corner, every shadow. Ilara met them in the lab's main airlock. As they stacked up to breach the door, she used her comms to broadcast a high-frequency acoustic pulse, a deafening shriek that would scramble their comms and disorient them. As they recoiled, she triggered the lab's air pressure seal. The door didn't slam shut. It depressurized, creating a powerful vacuum for a split second. The mercenaries staggered, their eardrums ringing, their senses scrambled. Ilara used the moment to smash the glass on a fire alarm, and then, with a well-practiced flick, she used the alarm's wiring to short out the main power in the section. Darkness. Absolute, disorienting darkness. In the ensuing chaos, she didn't fight. She dismantled. She used a small piece of rebar she had stashed to disable their night vision goggles, a swift, practiced motion. Then she became the predator. She moved among them, a ghost in the dark, her movements silent, her attacks precise. By the time the power flickered back on, a small half-hour later, 15 more men lay unconscious on the floor, their gear stripped, their weapons gone. 2 hours 31 down. Back in the command center, Dr. Thorne stared at the schematics, his jaw slack. The red dots were disappearing, one after another, at an impossible rate. He saw Ilara's location still moving, still active. Who is she? He whispered, but there was no one to answer. The fight stretched into its third hour. Ilara moved from section to section, using the station's systems to her advantage. She rigged pressure doors to slam shut, separating squads. She used the station's ventilation shafts as her own private highway, appearing where the enemy least expected her. She was not a superhero. She was a highly trained operative, using every tool, every piece of knowledge she had, to win a battle of attrition. Her face was streaked with sweat and grime, her breath a jagged hiss in the cold air, but her mind was a steel trap. She was tired. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by the dull ache of bruised ribs and a cut on her forehead. The mercenaries, realizing they were fighting a ghost, grew more and more frustrated. They were starting to panic, firing blindly into shadows, their formation broken. Kale, their leader, was a seasoned killer, but he was dealing with an enemy he couldn't comprehend. He had 90 men. How could one woman, a logistics officer, be tearing his elite force apart? By the 5th hour, the number of his men was down to 40. He made a desperate move. He took a team of 20 and went for the one place he knew she had to defend. The central server room. The heart of the station. Ilara was waiting. She had sealed off the server room with an improvised barricade of server racks and heavy equipment. As the mercenaries started to cut their way through, she was already in the room's ventilation system, waiting. The server room was a marvel of modern technology, and a booby trap waiting to happen. She had wired the cooling system's internal alarms to flash and blare, creating a strobe light hellscape that would cause sensory overload. She had also filled the room with a fine aerosolized conductive foam, a substance that would short out their electronics but not harm them. As they burst in, the room was a cacophony of light and sound. The foam filled the air. Their night vision goggles fried. Their comms went dead. Ilara, her eyes adapted to the flashing chaos, used the environment as her weapon. She picked them off one by one, using a series of well-placed punches and kicks to knock them unconscious. Her movements were not graceful. They were brutal, efficient, and precise. One of them managed to get a shot off, a bullet grazing her shoulder, but she didn't even flinch. She just moved faster, fueled by a deep-seated rage that they would dare to threaten the peaceful life she had built. When she was finished, 19 of the 20 men were down. The 20th, Kel's second in command, lay on the floor, his face a mask of disbelief and terror. "Who, are you?" he choked out, before Ilara hit a pressure point on his neck, and he went limp. She finally allowed herself a moment to breathe, leaning against a server rack, her body shaking from exhaustion. Her head throbbed, her ribs ached, and her shoulder felt like it was on fire, but she had one. At least, for now. She knew Kale was still out there. The final 2 hours were a game of cat and mouse between two ghosts. Kale, with his remaining handful of men, realized the futility of a direct assault. He was a hunter, and he was now hunting a predator far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. He cornered her in the station's greenhouse, a large glass-domed structure that held their small garden. It was a place of life, a stark contrast to the death and destruction they had wrought. "Ellie, come out. We know you're in there," he bellowed, his voice filled with a manic fury. He had 5 men left, 5 against 1, and he was still terrified. Ilara was not hiding, she was waiting. She was using the heat from the greenhouse's lamps to create a thermal decoy. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil and growing plants. She was not a ghost in this environment. She was a part of it. As Kale and his men entered, she dropped a canister of compressed gas from a high vent. Not a weapon, but a distraction. They fired at the source of the noise, their bullets shattering the glass. Ilara, her senses heightened by the 8-hour ordeal, was already moving. She grabbed a small gardening spade, a ridiculous weapon against an assault rifle. but in her hands, it was a finely balanced tool of destruction. She took down 2 men with a swift strike to the temple, a movement she'd practiced 1,000 times with more lethal implements. Cale was the last one standing. He raised his rifle, his eyes wide with a crazed hatred. "You're just an administrator. How are you doing this?" "I was never just an administrator," she said, her voice a tired rasp. "I was a soldier. I was a protector. And you came to my home." The final confrontation was a brutal dance of close-quarters combat. Elara, with her spade, against Cale, with his rifle and a tactical knife. Cale was good, but she was better. Every move he made, every feint, every attack, was a pattern she had seen and countered 100 times. She disarmed him, twisted his knife from his hand, and ended the fight with a swift, clean strike to his jaw. He fell, his eyes rolling back in his head. She stood over him, breathing heavily, the silence of the greenhouse deafening after 8 straight hours of combat. 90 men down, 0 casualties on her side. She had done it. Sometime later, as the dawn broke over the icy landscape, a rescue helicopter finally arrived. The pilots, a small team of special forces, saw the carnage and were stunned. 90 men, all neutralized. All without a single shot fired from the station's side. Dr. Thorne and the other scientists emerged from the shelters, their faces pale with shock. They found Elara in the command center, her hair down, a makeshift bandage on her shoulder, calmly logging the incident into the station's computer. She looked exhausted, but she was still the same quiet, professional Ellie they knew, except she wasn't. Dr. Thorne walked up to her, a profound look of awe on his face. "Ellie, the schematic, the dots, they just kept disappearing. What happened?" She looked up, a faint smile on her tired lips. "I just followed the manual, Doctor," she said. "The station's security protocols are very thorough. You'd be surprised what you can do with a little planning." The men who had underestimated her, who had thought she'd crumble, now stood in awe. They had seen not an administrator, but a guardian angel. They had seen not a victim, but a force of nature. They had seen Elara Vance, the woman who had fought 90 men alone for 8 straight hours, and had come out on top. And in that moment, they realized they hadn't just been saved. They had been given a new appreciation for the quiet, unassuming heroes who live among us.